So, welcome back, everybody. So, I hope you had a great Saturday, and we are back for some more Flesh and Blood action. This time with Kanaris Bounas and Nicolas Bouffard facing Viserai versus Chane. So, we had a pretty rough time again versus Separatist Union. We lost our previous matchup to Briar to Lexi. Alexander made a pretty close game, but never managed really to pull off a game like this. And here we have one of those older meta games like Viserai and Chane, one of those really key Runeblade like mirror decks. So both Runeblade Chane traditionally has been one of those decks where he really felt ahead while facing any other Runeblade hero. The reason being is that both the Blood Depth additional cards you get access to through the Soul Cycles and the Carrion Husk just give you these. It's almost sometimes like cheating a few turns, and on these really close, rough mirrors, it feels like it's. It really gives the edge over a matchup. It looks like the Chain player will get to have the first turn of the game, creating a cycle, playing a Mabrion Skies, and attacking with a Shrill of Skullform for a great 5. Shrill of Skullform is one of those cards where it really came out on Neverfest and became a staple pretty much immediately on every Runeblade deck because of how easy it is for pretty much all the rune blades to trigger its effect, and having a blue card that can potentially swing for 5 in these kind of filler turns is just so important. And here we see a pretty typical 1-2 punch line from the Chain player to playing a non-attack, an attack, and swinging with Rosetta for to chip some extra damage. Chane just loves to have the first turn of the game so many times because it's really important for Chane to ramp up his chains in order to have access to more banished cards and more cards enter his banish zone. So he really likes to ramp up the chains that the Chain player will have. It's not the end of the world for the Viserai because in the Runeblade mirrors is also as important how much of a pressure you're able to put. And here we see a red blood incantation from Kanaris, one of those cards where it really gave access to more cards that create rune sense, something that Viserai really loves to do. Oh, and here we see a runic reclamation being played, one of those again cards that came in Neverfest being a bit focused to face decks like Prism, but it's also really strong at deck like Chane because Soul Cycle is an aura, so potentially right now threatens to reduce the gas that the Chain player will have. And traditionally Viserai doesn't have many effects that trigger when hit, but Runic Reclamation just gives a bit of an advantage for this matchup because it's not a card that Chain likes to allow it to hit because it virtually puts Chane back a single turn. So it looks like we will just see a simple block with Captain Skull, and a Runic Reclamation will trigger, creating a Runescent token and like negating the advantage of the first turn that Chane got by going first. So it's a pretty typical turn, but it should feel great for Chane because he also forced the Viserai player to attack, and most of the time we've seen that the way that Viserais like to handle the match is building up a huge amount of Runescent tokens and doing like a pseudo OTK turn with Sonata. But here it looks like again we will see a second blue Thrill of Skullform, and here we see just the clean value from these blue attack actions. It's even though the Chain player had a bunch of blue cards, he still manages to put up a bit of a pressure on the Viserai player. So right now, because of Maburin Skies, Srilev's Calform has 5 in Go Again, and if Srilev's Calform hits, one Rincent will get to be created. So it's this consistent annoying thing where virtually if you allow the attack to hit, you will get dealt an extra point of damage via the Rincent. So it's right now Viserai has the life lead, but we are on Chane's turn, so this might end up to change pretty quickly, and having the one floating to swing with Rosetta is probably again the 1-2 punch turn that Chane loves to do so many times. And having a card in Arsenal is so important for Chane. It's sideboarding, commanding conquers against deck like Chane has been the way to go in a bit older formats. In the Monarch meta where Chane first came out, the first interaction with him was probably just how important it is to be able to interact with Chane's arsenal. And that pretty much ended up being that interacting with any Runeblade's arsenal is just so important. And it looks like we will see a block from the Viserai side. It's really tricky to remember just how many copies of Art of War have been through Chane's deck, because Art of War is one of those cards where the Chane deck really shines. Even after the pretty big hit that Chane got from the restrictions and the announcements, Art of War is one of those cards that just creates this immense value to the Chane player. So it looks like we are expecting a bit of a more passive turn from the Viserai player by choosing to block, and it's probably something that the Viserai is not too happy about. No, it looks like we will see an attack with the Swarming Gloom Veil to swing and keep the pressure up with the Swarming Gloom Veil to keep the damage output high, so Chane really is never allowed to have its own way. It looks like Chane will take the arcane damage, and the Swarming Gloom Veil will hit for 3 with just Go Again, and will be simply blocked with a red Riftbind. So a single banish, a Soul Reaping from the Chane side, and Soul Reaping really is one of those really strong cards that you almost always love to see in your hand. But it's also not so important, and here it is, the first Art of War. Speak of the devil, and looks like the Chane, even though he sacrificed a card in order to block the Swarming Gloom Veil, it looks like he still has the gas in order to banish Ghostly Visit and probably give +1 attack to all of his attack action cards this turn. And here we see the immense value that Chane gets from playing cards like this, like Art of War. A pretty typical turn, Shadow Puppetry, one of those really strong Shadow non-attack powerhouse cards. Probably the way that Flesh and Blood will be, it probably will be a reason to be a Shadow deck. It should be the first card to come in mind, even if it right now sees play only to Chane because probably he's the only competitive Shadow hero. Still, it's a card that we should really not sleep upon. So it looks like a 6 with Go Again from Shadow Puppetry will hit, and it looks like Viserai will allow the attack to hit, potentially threatening to banish an additional card to give access to more cards. It looks like the Chane player saw the card and left it on top without banishing it. The new lists from Chane really don't have the luxury of running too many Blood Debt cards, so it's something a bit typical, and looks like we will see a blue Drowning Dire being pitched. Wow, we haven't really seen Drowning Dire being played, and it looks like the Viserai player will just take the 4 additional damage, and that's the turn of the Chane. So, a pretty decent turn from Chane, even though he still managed to set up an Arsenal card, and he still managed to be prepared for the turns to follow. Chane still has his Carrion has cap, so probably it's the most important equipment to think about in this matchup. And here we will see a blue Arcanite Shard being pitched in order to play out of the Arcanite, ramping up to 3 runes and tokens into a Maveron Sky, up to 4 runes and tokens, and let's see, and we will see an Amplify the Arcanite for 7 go again with Maveron Skies. So again, a pretty decent turn from the Viserai, even though he was again a bit blue stacked. It's a pretty annoying turn for the Chane player to face. The Chane player right now is in this position where he really doesn't like to lose Husk. It's a bit too early, but if the 7 points of attack from Amplify that Arcanite hit, that means that an additional rune set will get created, and again here we see this typical 1-2 punch line that we've seen all pretty much the Rune Blades attempt to do while running Rosetta Thorn. Rosetta Thorn being such a great powerhouse card on all the modern Rune Blade archetypes, because most of them want to play non-attack actions, and doing the non-attack attack weapon attack just gives such a great value to pretty mediocre hands, let's say. So right now it looks like the Chane chose to take the arcane damage, and again he blocks only with a single Riftbind. Riftbind, even though is one of those really strong cards to be banished. Oh, and here we see a Revel in Runeblood, one of those really strong cards that the Viserai, probably most of the Runeblades got their hands into, but Viserai just makes an amazing use of it. So 5 rune sets being created, 4 from the Revel in Runeblood, and plus an additional one from the Viserai's effect. So just for a single 0 pitch card to potentially threaten 5 arcane damage is just so annoying, and all this damage that gets to chip through. Most of the time Runeblade decks don't really run too many blue cards, meaning that it's not easy to be able to block all of these stacked arcane damage that the Viserai deck is so easily able to generate on some of these games. And right now we are on the threat zone, and we see a yellow Thrill of Scarf being banished. That's interesting again. So right now, and we see the second Art of War being played. Wow, it's really one of those cards that the Chane player probably really needed, that because he has been dealt a great amount of damage, and having access to the Art of War in order to banish a Blood-Dipped card and to draw an additional 2 cards and give +1 to your attack actions just allows Chane to do these huge turns. Because right now Chane should be start to filling up the pressure, because Viserai still has his gauntlets up, and now it looks like we'll see a Command and Conquer being played. I'm guessing that the Art of War gave go again to the next attack action rather than the +1, so that means that the Command and Conquer will not be the end of the story for this turn. I don't think the Viserai player of this caliber forgot to create a Soul Suckle, even though if it was his last attack, and he still has Abandoned Demigod into his banish zone. It's really interesting with Chane how important it is to remember which Blood-Dipped cards require you to have played a non-attack action, and it's something that happens pretty often where with Art of War turns, where you pitched your non-attack action, you played Art of War, you banished an attack, but you still haven't actually played a non-attack action. So that means that right now, with the information we have at hand right now, Bounding Demigod is not able to be removed from the banish zone. So it looks like we've seen just a Bloodsith Skeletal block from Viserai. And here it is, the Shadow Puppetry again, all of these powerhouse cards giving +1 to the Bounding Demigod, closing the chain in order to play the non-attack action of Shadow Puppetry into the Bounding Demigod, so that for just a 0 pitch and a virtually 0 cards, just a single card from hand, Chane is able to swing with a total of 5 with Go again and potentially threatening a bit more of a card advantage. And this is the reason why I still Chane, after all of the hits he's got, his innate abilities to create sheer value from his card just pushes him so much further. I mean, it's really interesting to see what LSS has in store for Chane, because he's most of the Chane players really love all of this interaction, and it really feels great to see games like this where he's able to maximize all of his banishes and draws and stuff like that. And Viserai right now should be feeling the pressure, because if Viserai allows his life total to go a bit too low, he should notice that the Chane player still has his hash cap, meaning that the Chane player still has his pseudo time hook, that if Viserai still wants to put up pressure, Chane will have the bio turn. So it looks like we've seen a Rosetta turn for 2 and 2, dealing 4 additional damage, and I could be wrong, but I think Chane didn't create a Soul Suckle this turn. I might not be sure, I might have missed it. I don't know. So back to the Viserai's turn. So it looks like a Runeblood Incantation will pop the final Runechant, and on the next turn it will get destroyed. And right now this single Runechant reduced the cost of Runeflesh by 1, meaning that he will be able to do a small attack in order to chip through and pretty much buy the Carrion Husk. And that's really great play from the Kanaris side, because it's when Chane is at this point where his life total is a bit close, you don't really want to execute your best attack. You don't really want to allow Carrion Husk to get its full value, and having this small attack like Runeflesh that baits the Carrion Husk user because his life total is just so close is just so important right now. So the Carrion Husk has been banished, the clock is there, there is a pretty healthy lead on the Viserai side, but not that much. But Chane really hasn't been lucky, apart from the thing that he drew to Art of Wars. He hasn't really been lucky with his blooded hits. So let's see how he will choose to operate, because the thing with Blood is that most of the time your cards are a bit weaker than everybody else, because they have the Blood keyword, meaning that they can be played from the banish zone. And here we will see probably +2 in the Captain's Call to a belittle, swinging for 5 with Goyen and potentially threatening an attack with Rosetta. So that miss really hindered Chane's momentum, because he really would have loved to keep the pressure up, because right now the game goes to the point where Chane will start be taking all these blood damage hits, and he really wants to keep his life total lead, because it's really important to remember that Viserai still hasn't used his Scaletta. We've seen 0 Sonatas being played so far, so the Vexing Quail Hunt is still up. We might see, even if there is a bit of a life lead towards the Chane side, there is still the potential threat of Vexing into Scaletta, into Sonata, into these huge turns. And here we see, oh my god, speak of the devil, a Mordred Tide being played into a Maverick Skies, creating this massive Tyrion sense, and Mordred Tide honestly being probably the reason Viserai is so strong. And here we see a Spellblade. Oh, it looks like we will have a somewhat setup turn for Viserai. Right now the Spellblade Assault swings for just 2, but creating a massive 5 Runechants behind. The 2 means that it cannot be blocked from Arcanite Skullcap and Spellbound Creepers, because Arcanite Skullcap does not have an armor value because Chane's life total is higher right now. So that means that the Chane, if he doesn't want to allow the yellow Maverick Skies to hit, to create an additional 3 runes and tokens because of Maverick Skies and the Mortar Tide, he really has to sacrifice a card. And that's a great turn because it can also count as a somewhat lethal threatening turn, and also count as like a turn where he can threaten lethal, and he can also set up his following turn. So it looks like we will see a block with a Tome of Fiendal, so that's an interesting deck choice. We've seen some Chane lists running Tome of Fiendal because having access to all of these go again has a great synergy with Spellbound Creepers and allows you to draw into a bit stronger turns. It's just so important. So it looks like we will see the pop of the gauntlets to create 3 additional runes and tokens, and see a massive swing of 8 runes and tokens plus 4 damage from the Rosetta. That means that he is threatening a 12 damage turn. There is still one floating from the Chane side, but that means that there is no way that the Chane player really should want to allow this full attack to hit, because if he doesn't choose to block with any card from his hand, he could potentially block an additional one from Arcanite Skullcap. I'm guessing, if my math is not mistaken. Yeah, he's taking just too much arcane damage. So yeah, the Arcanite Skullcap will have a block value, but it looks like no, he chooses to block with a yellow Thrill of Scarform in order to maintain a bit of a health lead, because right now with just a single card in his hand there is a big chance that, yeah, some Blood-Depth cards that could potentially not being able to be played, and that could potentially mean that the Chane won't be able to prevent this Blood-Depth from dripping his life total down to just 2 points of damage. And the thing is right now that Viserai should really consider the instant Blood-Depth card from Chane side, Invert Existence, that we've seen earlier being pitched from the Chane player, that he could potentially threaten lethal with a card like this. So Viserai really doesn't want to allow his life total to go too low, but it looks like no, we will see the Chane player just choosing to retain a card in his arsenal, creating a Soul Suckle and giving the turn back to the Viserai. So the Viserai should really know that this is the turn. If on this turn Viserai is managed to put up enough pressure to force the opponent Chane to commit way too many resources in blocking, that means that on the following turn he probably is dead. So it looks like we witness a Runic Reclamation, not the greatest attack from the Viserai side, but it should be enough to pull 2 cards from the hand of the Chane player. So Chane player right now has a blue card in Blood-Depth, in Banish Zone, so not the best, 4 Suckles and 3 cards in hand. And here we see just an additional red hit, a Howl from Beyond. So this should feel pretty good, but it really depends on what are the last cards in the Chane's deck, because he could potentially be able to remove all of the Blood-Depth from his Banish Zone except from Carrion Husk, and him having 2 life totals means that he could potentially get to have another turn. Okay, so right now the Viserai should have perfect information of what he's about to expect, and it looks like we'll see a Time Snap pitch into a Howl from Beyond, into a Shadow Puppetry, into a Bounding Demigod, swinging for +3, 4, 5, 6. 6 with the potential threat of Shadow Puppetry, so the +1 should really mean So it looks like we'll see a bit of an overblock from the side of Viserai. If I'm not mistaken, it's 256. Yeah, 256, meaning that 6 points has been blocked, and Rosetta will swing for 2 arcane damage and 2 physical. Taking everything means that the Viserai chose to block with all of his equipment to maintain a 5 point of 5 health total, meaning that he is not dead to a double invert existence. And that's really important. Looks like we've seen. Oh, that's amazing! Wow, he just kept an amazing hand. Like having Maveron Skies into meet and greet means that meet and greet has go again no matter what. So that means that Viserai will be able to swing with his Rosetta, and right now the only way for the Chane player to prevent the 2 from the Arcane Rosetta is via the Arcanite Skull Cap. That means that the single Rune Chant plus the 2 Arcane damage from Rosetta plus the 2 physical from Rosetta require 3 cards from his hand. A blue pitch in order to prevent the 2 Arcane damage from Arcanite Skull Cap, another card to pitch in order to prevent the Rune Chant token, and another card in order to block from the Rosetta Thorn. And that should be game from the Viserai side. I don't think there, unless Chane runs something really interesting or he has a turn where Art of War is involved, it's not he's unable to fully block this turn. So if he manages to fully block, he will be on a single life total, and he still has the Carony Husk banished, so that means if he's not able to kill Viserai on his turn with 0 cards in hand, which is a bit of unheard of, he should be dead. So right now we should keep in mind that Rosetta Thorn and Rune Chant are 2 separate sources of arcane damage, and because right now the Chane has 3 arcane barrier from the Skull Cap and a single from Vexing Wilhelm, he's not able to pitch a blue card in order to prevent the 2 from Rosetta and 1 from the Rune Chant token. And that's what happened here. We saw Chane committing all of his hand in order to block, and here it is, but it's a bit too late. Here we see 4 cards being banished that have Blood Depth, and here we see an Art of War, the 3rd Art of War actually. Wow, I think there could be probably a way for the Chane to manipulate this turn in order to block a bit more efficiently if he was lucky enough to draw some additional blue cards, but the thing is that probably the game was a bit locked towards the Viserai's favor. So probably that's a game we've seen a lot in competitive constructed metagame, where Chane and Viserai are both these aggressive mid-range decks where they love to pressure the opponent with all these mixed types of damage. And we've seen probably Chane starting to losing some ground to the Viserai because of how just quick the Viserai is nowadays. Because earlier in the day when Monarch was out, Chane was just so much faster, but because Viserai finally got some love in Neverfest, he is just strong enough to be able to push through Chane to a corner where he's not able to fully commit his game plan, and Chane most of the time really wants to take his time. So even though if we've witnessed the 2 Art of Wars from Chane, he really had some awkward turns, or some turns where the Viserai player managed to put enough pressure to force some cards out of the Chane hand. And this game could potentially just shows how an efficient deck right now Viserai has become, because of how great is with a Viserai deck that pretty much all your cards can potentially add up to a point where you do still get turns that could potentially threaten a lot of damage, even if you don't have, the god hands that we've heard so many stories from any deck. So that ties it up 2-2 again. So it looks like it's a motive from FAB that we always like to lose our first matches and swinging later in the day. So tomorrow at around this time we will have the final match of the week against Separatist Union, and we will have Kanaris facing off, I don't recall the last player's name, towards the game that will determine the victor of the second week of the City League. So, this is your host Saxo. Thank you for joining us. If you liked the content, leave a follow and hit subscribe. We will still be trying to stream as many games as possible before we leave for Krakow in the following week. So next week we might not have this many games because we will be attending the calling in Krakow. So we'll see you around, and again, thank you for joining us.